Okay. You sure you're ready this time?
It's not me. There's nothing up here, buddy.
Oh.
Hello, my name is Rain Layer. I'm 12 years old from Ottawa, Ontario. I'm also the creator of Rain Band's custom medical wear bracelets. I'm currently raising money for the Chio's Gender Clinic with my Keychains for Chio campaign. To find out more on how you can help me out with this fundraiser, please visit my website. It's www.rainbands.ca. That's RAYNBANDS.ca. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Disability Inclusion Podcast.
Today's episode comes with a content warning as we discuss sexism in politics and contains some ableist remarks. Thank you very much for taking the time to do this.
You're welcome.
The whole idea behind it is not only to give access to the disabled community, but it's also one of the main things I hope is people understand that there's a difference between Lisa Thompson and Lisa Thompson MPP and minister and so on, because there's been a lot of people who are getting very angry at different politicians, and removing the personal part of that I think is very important for people to understand, and that's one of the main focuses. So hopefully stuff like this helps to break down that relationship with people, I guess is an easy way to say that.
Well, I really appreciate that, and I thank you for that as well, actually, because you're absolutely right. There's Lisa the politician, but there's Lisa the person from Huron Bruce that's called to call this area, or proud to call this area home, and yeah, we all have feelings at the end of the day, and we're all trying our best. Can I
Okay.
just before we get going, Sarah and Jay, are you okay if I take a picture?
Absolutely.
Sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
On the count of three. 1, 2, 3. Excellent. Thank you.
So the first question we have is, what made you decide to go into politics?
Well, this may sound a little corny to everyone listening, but I proclaimed in high school that I was interested in running for provincial politics. But the main reason for that is my mother had served for 35 years as the clerk treasurer or the chief administrative officer for a municipality in the county of Huron. And she was in 1967 when she won the opportunity to serve as clerk treasurer. She was only the second woman in the county of Huron to serve at that level. And so she always was an inspiration to me. But needless to say, our dinner table between mom and my dad and my family, we always talked about current events and what was happening at the local level, and what we thought should be done to make a difference. And that just stuck with me. And as a result, lo and behold, I have had the honor of serving this amazing area of Ontario, the riding of Huron Bruce, since October 6th, 2011.
Why did you choose the PC party?
Well, I grew up in a home where it was very important to be responsible with your money. And while sometimes that's easier said than done, because you have to balance the wants and the needs, I really embraced the essence of the PC party, in the sense that we needed to be, as a government, as a party, we believe in being fiscally responsible. And if we spend our dollars and invest our dollars wisely, we should have money left over to do more. And it's a tough balance, but we need to be fiscally responsible to ensure that we have money left over at the end of the day for those important social programs and for the new investments that need to be made, like broadband, so people can connect like we are today through the forum that you're hosting. if anyone has any questions on that, I certainly can expand on that further. But essentially, you know, we need to be fiscally responsible in order to have dollars left over to invest in new priorities as they come forward.
May I ask a follow-up on that?
Sure. Mhm.
So when the PC party is very clear with the message that you just said about what their goals are. Their core goal is to be responsible with money. But one of the biggest or I don't want to say attacking points for people when it comes to conservatives is just that. So more people in the last election wanted the conservatives in place because of the saving money. And how I guess the what I'm trying to say is when that is the clear goal for the PC party, when your party gets attacked for doing just that, how is that, how do you handle attacks like that where like this is what we said we were going to do, why are you lashing out that we're doing just that?
I appreciate that question, and I think it's about making sure you have resolve because you're keeping your eye on that goal. That goal is to ensure that we have dollars for social programs, we have dollars available to invest in broadband to make sure every corner of this province has the connectivity that they deserve. And you have to keep your eye on that end goal in order to get through some of the tough re- um, the tough responses and some of the things that we hear. But again, I think there's a caveat to all of this. 2020 was an anomaly, and we very quickly as a party agreed. And in fact, uh, it was there was no discussion. Everyone agreed immediately that our number one priority through this pandemic was keeping Ontarians safe. So in 2020, we set aside our goals to focus 100% on keeping people safe from this pandemic the best we can.
You're up, Sarah.
Okay, I was just debating a follow up on that, but I'll go ahead with the questions that we've got. And in your time as MPP for Huron Bruce, what has been your best day?
Oh boy, I've had a few of them, I must say. I think my best days are when I'm successful in advocating for priorities for communities in this riding, for communities and businesses. And that means, for instance, Sarah, I'll never forget the day when I heard we finally achieved annualized funding for Jessica's house so that that hospice in Exeter would receive funding on an annual basis from the Government of Ontario as a complement to what already happens at the Huron Hospice just down the road near Clinton, because the demand is there. That was a really, really good day.
It was a
One of
big
the
day
hard-
in the county.
yes, yes, it was. And one of the hardest days, probably, hmm, sometimes, some, I get emotional. I wear my heart on my sleeve to everyone listening.
Yeah, I know.
Yes, you do know, Sarah. And the hardest day for me was actually when my dad passed. But he was my biggest supporter, and he knew what being an MPP for Huron Bruce needed. And that is my 100% commitment. And because of that commitment, I wasn't with him when he passed. And yep, that was my hardest day.
That's one of the things, that's one of the main goals is to teach people there are the people behind the politics and that.
The
And
human side.
because no matter what, at the end of the day, you are a person. You can't be viewed as strictly a politician. And with what you just explained, when there's situations like that, there's a whole bunch of people that think you have to sell your soul to be a politician, and you have to uh, give up family life, give up
Yeah.
give up you who you are. Is that actually a thing? Can you remain you and still be a politician who has to um, not necessarily follow party line, but you subscribe to a party's messaging and platform and so on?
Well, thank you for recognizing um, the situation that we have. But again, I'm very proud, and I think my dad would be too. But I'm very proud to share with everyone listening today that I'm known around the cabinet table and around caucus as being a riding person first. And my number one priority is always making sure that priorities from this area of Ontario are represented to the best of my abilities. And it's not always easy to do, but that's what drives me. And the people in this riding prove to be the adrenaline that keeps me driving through those hard days. And um, so I guess my answer to you is no, I don't subscribe. Um, I make sure that I continue to fight for priorities at the local level as well as what needs to get done that makes sense across the rest of the province. For instance, I stand with my cabinet and my premier when we say our number one priority through 2020 and into 2021 and for as long as it needs to be, our priority is protecting Ontarians, not only in this riding of Huron Bruce, but across the province. And we're going to do whatever we can to do just that. So it's a balance, right?
Mm-hmm. That's one of the things I really hope people get through the conversations. Hopefully, we're able to have conversations with many different politicians from parties and levels of government, just so that the human side of it can come out. Because at the end of the day, there's still a human being involved.
Yes, actually, and an example that I want to share is it's not what it seems. Like when you see Question Period on the TV, um, that sometimes it seems to be a bit of a show because it's on TV, but we truly do have friends across the aisle in opposition. And on Boxing Day morning, I received a phone call from somebody who I feel is a friend from the NDP party, and that MPP was having trouble in a long-term care home. And I immediately connected the MPP with the Minister of Long-Term Care on Boxing Day morning because it was the right thing to do. And I wanted to help a friend. And I really believe in the efforts that Minister Fullerton is putting forward. And I wanted them to connect directly.
When you say that I had an interview for the podcast yesterday with an NDP MPP, and he referred to the Conservatives and Liberals and Green Party as colleagues. And that's something else I was kind of taken off guard by that, because you guys are all supposed to hate each other. You have opposing views and goals and stuff. But I pushed him on using the term colleagues, and you all, the Conservatives do form government, but everyone is a parliamentarian, I think is how you say it.
We're all a parliamentarian, yes.
So you all form the current government, but the Conservatives are in power, which is something else that normally we kind of lose sight of. Is you are all currently working towards, well, hopefully everyone there is working towards Ontario being a better place, and I keep
Absolutely, yeah. And to your point, Jake, I really respect the fact that all 124 MPPs that have the honor of sitting at Queen's Park and representing their riding, they all are trying to do their best to make sure their own riding priorities are dealt with as well. And so not only am I an MPP, but as a minister, when they come to me with questions or issues pertaining to my file, both myself and my team work really, really hard to make sure that we can do our best to help satisfy a concern or better explain policies and procedures so that that MPP can go back and help their constituents.
That's something that I think is really important to point out is because you are a minister, all MPPs would come to you for, you called it your file, which is the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services, I think it is.
Yes, that's correct.
So you work as a minister not for the party, but for all the MPPs.
That's correct.
That's something that I think tends to get lost in all of it as well. Sorry, Sarah, I kind of took your question because we started
That's okay.
to go further.
No, I was just gonna say that on that note, so that people can better understand what exactly is the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services.
Okay, so I describe my ministry as being the machinery of government, and its second responsibility is making sure that we have um, the best consumer protection platform possible. And so when I talk about being the machinery of government, when the pandemic hit, part of the ministry is responsible for um, HR and IT. And so very quickly, within about, I would say 7 to 10 business days at most, we enabled everyone that works for the government of Ontario in all corners of this province to work remotely from home. And that was no small feat. And I had I had team members working around the clock to make that happen. Another thing that my ministry is responsible for, pardon me, is collaborating with other ministries to make sure that we can provide supports in an efficient manner. For instance, we work with the Ministry of Children, Community, and Social Services to make sure that people that qualified for additional COVID payments or pandemic payments were receiving their money on time, and that we're simplifying the process so that people don't have to be picking up the phone and saying, what happened? Where's my support that I need this month? We're doing so in a far better manner that is transparent, that hopefully reduces those phone calls saying, hey, what's happening in my file? Another example would be from a consumer protection perspective is price gouging. Early on, I had a phone call from somebody from Seaforth, Ontario, saying that they were concerned about the price of hand sanitizer that they saw in a particular store. And so I was able to put not only wear my MPP hat, but put on my minister hat as well and work with my ministry team to make sure that we put into place a mechanism for people to report egregious price gouging. And if it met a certain level of criteria, we would refer that price gouging example onto the provincial police for further investigation. So it's been an interesting time this past year for sure.
With those roles that you gave the examples of, it's the Disability Inclusion podcast. So I'm going to focus on the one about the relationship between your ministry and the Ministry of Childcare and Social Services and stuff like that. You say your ministry is the machinery, so you're kind of like a overall support.
Correct.
So
That's right.
when it comes to like the programs, the administration of that, these other ministers come to you to ask your ministry for either support in setting something up or change? Like, I'm trying to figure out the relationship between
Sure.
your ministry and other ministries.
So, with children, community, and social services, they would come to us with the parameters of a program, um, in terms of, this is what people need to receive. They have everything defined. This is what people need to receive. This is how much. This is why, and we build the IT around it to facilitate that online payment, so that uh, so that frees up the consultants within the Ministry of Children, Community, and Social Services to truly do their job, as opposed to chasing down paper. Sometimes that still needs to happen, but do you understand the difference? We're enabling them to better serve their clients, as opposed to worrying about where a particular paper check is. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what I wanted, because that would change some of the ways that any follow-up questions come, because you are not part of that ministry. You provide that ministry support. So that's another the whole encompassing thing is about getting people to understand politics a bit more, because you before you explained that, I thought that your ministry was, I'll say, the parent ministry, and that you gave the orders to them and then they did what you. So just understanding the relationship is something that the average person, even some people who are interested deeply in politics, don't understand the actual relationship between different ministries. So thank you for explaining that.
Another current example would be the business supports that our government is providing small business during the pandemic. For instance, during this current shutdown, 28-day shutdown, we have business supports whereby a small business, if they have less than 100 employees, they can apply for up to $1,000 to offset the cost of PPE, not only to keep their employees safe, but to keep their customers safe as well. And so the Ministry of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade told us the parameters in which businesses would qualify, and then we facilitate that payment upon proof of expense. Another example would be if a business is shut down because they're in a hot spot, or in the current 28-day shutdown, they can apply for funding support. And again, it's the Ministry of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade has created the parameters in which the business can or cannot qualify. And then based on those qualifications, it's my ministry that facilitates the payment.
One last question on that topic, and this one I'll understand if you choose not to answer it, but how, as a politician, regardless of ministry and stuff like that, as a politician, if there is something that you maybe don't agree with or goes against either your personal beliefs or what you think, because you don't get to ask your riding every single day, every single thing. So you're elected to kind of be the overall voice for a riding. When there's something that comes into like an internal conflict, but your job is still to provide the support and to help facilitate and all of that, how is that something that you deal with on a, I don't want to say daily basis, like it happens every day, but...
And it doesn't, no.
Because the whole question I'm trying to ask is the opposite of, do you have to give up your soul to be a politician, is how do you maintain who you are as a politician in that type of a situation? If that makes sense.
Certainly. I think it's important that people within Huron Bruce that are watching today and all across the province, that it's important that you realize that MPPs need to feel supported so that they can be confident in sharing they're the voice of the riding, if you will. Like time and time again, whether it's in caucus with my entire government colleagues or around the cabinet table with my fellow ministers, time and again, I often, more times than not, share real life experiences from my riding to demonstrate why I agree with something or why I may not agree with something. But as you can well imagine, it's a democracy, and at the end of the day, we have a premier that, just for instance, we had a discussion just a few days ago, and he said, "Okay, let's take a vote on this," and that way, everybody was able to share how they felt and have their voice heard. But then at the end of the day, you have to accept that the majority, you know, would would define the path forward, just like in any democracy.
I think
Because it certainly doesn't come across that he's running the government that way. It comes across that he's running it all on his own.
Oh no, I can assure you not. Premier Ford has a huge heart, and he wants to hear what's happening at the local riding level. And I can tell you that it, he, I think he'll smile when I say this. He respectfully butts in to say, "Okay, let's have a vote. I want to hear from everybody," and he makes sure that every single person around that cabinet table has a chance either to share their thoughts in an eloquent way or through the show of hands. Um, and I just appreciate that so much of him.
no leader would ever be 100% liked, or I don't think any leader has ever been 100% liked. That's not how Canadians and democracy works. There's some people who didn't vote for a certain person and so on. How do you deal with right now there's always four sides to how a event plays out or how a situation plays out, because you have the NDP, the Liberals, the Greens, and the Conservatives. How do you deal as a party that's in power with people constantly, either media or just people lashing out at the leader, and if this person down here, this MP over here, or this minister does something, it's not normally people will go there. They'll go at, well, it's Doug Ford's fault. He's responsible for everything, and if I don't like it, it's his fault. He's bad. Like the spin of a situation and it all being labeled as like that. Doug Ford's the leader. He kind of signs up for taking a lot of the stuff that comes your way or his way. But how do you deal with, like, you're saying that he likes to have votes and get open opinion, but as Sarah said, the overall perception is no, he's in control, it's his way. Or how do you deal with stuff like that? Because it's important for people to understand that if he's constantly asking his MPs for the overall consensus of the ridings and that is not something that's out there. That's not something that's in the media. It's not really presented. So that's... Sorry, it was
Huge.
a long-winded...
It's huge.
Yeah. It's a long-winded explanation because I think it's so important that people understand. Again, it's all the person in politics, because there's a lot of people who frame, especially from the disabled community, we pretty much hate any leader of any party for the most part, but it's really framed as he's this bad guy, but you're saying no, he's not. He's actually, he cares. And sorry, it's a very long-winded thing.
I'm being completely honest when I say, when we first formed government, people would ask time and again, "What's Premier Ford like? What's he really like?" And my comment back consistently was, the more I get to know him, the more I like him. And I think people through the pandemic, because he's gone directly to the cameras, he's gone directly to the people through the cameras, people are seeing him for who he is, as opposed to his comments being interpreted and spun, to use your word earlier, to fit a particular narrative. And I think he's resonating as people get to see him day in and day out being who he is and what he stands for. I think people appreciate him more. Uh, pose Now as opposed to pre-pandemic. And we need to keep in mind as well that what gets posted typically tends to be one-sided. I just ask everyone watching today to be open-minded and understand and that there's usually two sides to every story, and to get that balance, you maybe need to do a I do too. I have to dig a little bit further to understand the other side, and that's just the way it is today.
To,
I mentioned the word consensus as well, and it's important to recognize the difference between consensus and and voting. Consensus is you talk it out and you don't give up until everyone can agree
Mm.
that it's a path forward that should be taken. Whereby voting gets you to a decision earlier, and people can demonstrate that they agree or disagree, but the majority of the vote determines the path. And so there's a time for consensus and there's a time for voting as well, which I'm sure you can appreciate.
Thank you for clarifying that.
to be fair, though, it seems like Premier Ford has the members of his caucus on what I refer to on Twitter as a gag order. Um,
Huh.
it's like people are calling and calling and calling their MPPs or ministers' offices, and you don't get a response. So it's hard to get the other side of the story if
Yeah, that's fair.
they're not allowed to talk.
Well, I can tell you, based on my experience as minister, um, the number of emails we receive on a daily basis is just incredible. And I always prided myself in being timely, and Sarah, you can probably attest to this. It takes me a heck of a lot longer because I do like that personal approach as well. But in some cases, if it's just a form letter that is being sent, and we can identify when it's a form letter and when it's something that's been sincere effort on an individual's part. Um, Form letters typically receive form responses because it's the the message in that form email or that form letter has been devised or created at a different level, and so we just matched message to message, so to speak. But when you can, it's easy to identify the individuals that take time to share their thoughts, and that's when I know I can only speak for my example. I take a little bit longer to make sure that we can um, address the concerns or the ideas in an appropriate manner.
Just to finalize this, because there's Sarah framing the question the way she did. Where is the disconnect? Do you feel where's the disconnect in many people have echoed that they feel like certain parties are not as approachable. Is that an optics issue on our behalf or on that party's behalf?
I think it goes beyond optics. To be honest, it really depends on how busy an office is, and for instance, myself. Um, I'm the MPP of Huron, Minister of Government and Consumer Services, and as of January 1, I'm representing Ontario as chair of the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians Canada region. So I'm taking on a national chairmanship. And I also, in that role, work with women leaders from throughout the Commonwealth. And so sometimes the plate gets really, really full. And
Congratulations on that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that very much. And sometimes my local team is an extension of me. And Sarah, I'm going to use our relationship as an example. Sarah knows she can reach out to me, but sometimes I'm just running on all cylinders and borrowing a cylinder from whomever I can to just get the jobs done that I need to get done. And I'll ask somebody from my constituency team to follow up with Sarah as opposed to me directly. I know it's not ideal, Sarah, and I don't like doing that, but in some cases, to give you a quicker response, sometimes that has to happen. So people need to appreciate what exactly does that MPP have on their plate, and appreciate that sometimes another example would be I need to reach out to another ministry to get the answer that an individual is looking for. And sometimes that, depending on what that minister has on his or her plate, sometimes that can take a long time as well. So any given day, it depends on how busy an individual is, or if there's new policy or regulation coming forward, sometimes we like to wait to be able to share that new policy and regulation as well to give a more complete answer or response. So the timing is very important as well.
That's something that if you have not had to reach out and either work with or have help from your MPPs, most people think it's an MPP in an office. They don't realize they have staff, and depending on the riding size, it determines how many offices and staff and so on. So I know my riding has 3 offices, so that's 3 offices or 4 because you have one at Queen's Park as well.
Yes.
So 4 offices for whoever is the MPP for my riding, and you are an office manager, and then you are an MPP, and then this, and then this, and then this. So they're
You get it, yes.
they're
To give you a sense of our geography of the riding that Sarah and I call home, this is, according to Wikipedia, the riding of Huron Bruce is 600 square kilometers larger than the province of Prince Edward Island. And then there's ridings bigger than that, which I think, Jay, your home, you call your home based on the sound of the number of constant offices you have.
Congratulations, as Sarah had said, and it kind of leads into another question that we wanted to ask. And there's still a lot who believe that politics is for older, rich, white men, and we're seeing in Ontario there's a lot more diversity in Queen's Park than ever before. Have you endured any issues that it's tied into people getting involved? We want people to get involved in politics, but one of the biggest fears is sexism, racism, any of the types of things that we get told still exist because it's someone used the term old boys club to me. So is that still a thing that you have to fight through? Have you endured it? I'll end there because I don't want to over ask this question as well. I have a habit of doing that.
Yeah. Well, I will share one personal example, and it goes back to when I was in opposition, and there was the gas plant scandal down in the Mississauga, Oakville area that you may recall. And I was representing my party in the estimates committee, and we were questioning the government on the gas plant scandal. And I had done my homework, and I was very well prepared. And my line of questioning was very pointed, and the individual I was asking, who was representing government, snapped his head and said, "Who are you to ask me a question like that?" And I'll never forget that, but I was very quick to respond that I was an elected official. I was elected by the people of Huron Bruce, and because of that, I was at the estimates table to do a job. And I think that really spurred me in my role as that has seen me, as of January 1, take on the role of chair of the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians for Canada, because across Canada, we work together in a nonpartisan way to encourage and more women to become interested in making a difference at any level of politics or leadership, be it within an organization or a business or ultimately government. And we're identifying and trying to resolve the hurdles and how to get over them so that we not only can get more women involved in politics, because they tend to work more on consensus, to your point about the difference between consensus and voting. And we we very much, I've come to appreciate in this role how accessibility for all to have an opportunity to have their voice heard and be elected is so important. And that's why I'm pleased to say, Sarah, you'll recall in the last provincial election, we had um, a very full slate of people to consider in terms of the people that were running for the provincial seat to represent Huron Group.
And on that note, what advice would you have for somebody that was looking to get into provincial politics?
Well, I think this goes for any level of politics, Sarah. Um, you really need, you have to have the interest and the drive and the understanding of what effective policy and legislation can do at the local riding level and across the jurisdiction, be it a provincial or federal or local at the municipal level. And secondly, you really need to have a strong support system. I could not do what I do if I didn't have an incredible family that stands with me. And from my husband through to my immediate family through to my extended family. In many cases, we're all in it together. Because to earlier points, when things can get really nasty and it's easy for people to just throw mean-spirited quips on Facebook and things like that, it affects your family as well. For instance, the youngest in my family, she went right off of Facebook when we were first elected into government, because I think in many cases it was she was taking it more to heart because I had more greater defense mechanism than she had. So I had to help her develop that defense mechanism to be able to deflect it.
That's something that, thank you for pointing that out. That's something else that I was told, don't attack people, attack systems. So if you have an issue with the way something is, attack the system. And it was powerful a statement on its own, but you just put that in the most perfect framing possible. Is that an attack on you personally would be an attack seen by family members, by friends,
Yes.
by anybody who can see it, when that person may have an issue with the system. And
That's right.
and that's, again, it's getting repetitive, but that's the whole point that we're trying to do, is we're trying to not only focus on the disability perspective, but also how people can best work with the politicians instead of attacking politicians. And you gave one of the best possible explanations for why the attacking, yes, you're a public figure and you're open to attack, but people who want change need to work with you instead of attacking you.
Absolutely, and Jay, you're so right about that. I learned um, in my very first job, when I worked for Agriculture, Food, and Rural Affairs, that um, you, to your point, you attack the issue and you leave the emotion out of it, because emotion takes up energy and it wastes time. So if you can remove the emotion away from the situation at hand, you can resolve that situation or issue so much quicker.
Another question that we wanted to ask is, Service Ontario, it seems like they try to put an office anywhere they can put an office. But in some instances, it's more about getting more offices out there and not necessarily taking in mind accessibility to the services. Um, a lot of people in the disabled community feel that there's accessibility issues physically and then online, either by not having the ability to go online or especially it's a lot of it is highlighted or amplified by COVID, but it's existed before. It's just there are people like me, for instance. I cannot go out. I can't go physically to any places. If I didn't have my internet or a phone, I would rely on going to a physical place. So, are there any changes or anything that are here? Let me ask it this way. I think this is a better way of asking it. Has COVID and the situations that have been highlighted by COVID created a new perspective for the province, the government, to maybe look at accessibility of services and of programs?
Yeah, Jay, thank you for asking that because you know what? Going back to an earlier question, Service Ontario is another example of the mechanics of government that fall onto my responsibility plate as Minister of Government and Consumer Services. But through Service Ontario, we enabled the Ministry of Transportation to facilitate the validation tags or accessibility permits for parking. We work with the Ministry of Health for health cards, etc. That's another example of how we work and collaborate with other ministries. But in terms of access issues, I'm really glad you raised that because we're the pandemic certainly has shone a light on how we can, how we need, how we must make it easier for people to access the services that they require online. We already have 40 services online from birth certificates through to changing the address on your driver's license, but we can do better at that, and that's the number one priority for me as Minister of Government and Consumer Services looking into 2021. That's one of my New Year's resolutions. And as in addition to that, we are looking and evaluating the actual storefronts, if you will, the access points in across Ontario. And if anyone listening today, or if you're talking to any of your friends or family afterwards, if you know of a location where it's difficult to access, please, through Sarah or yourself, Jay, let me know. Pardon me.
Exeter, Ontario.
I wondered about that, Sarah. I will follow up with them. I wondered if you're going to bring that up. I know exactly where it is, and I understand what you're saying. And I'm going to, Jack, let's make sure we address that as soon as we can, because we need to make sure that Service Ontario services, if you will, are easily accessible. And we want to drive as much online as possible for all the J's in this province so that you don't have to worry about getting a ride or going out to do something. You can access anything you need via the online Service Ontario. But we recognize there are some instances where people still like to look a person in the eye and have that face-to-face contact. So we need to hear about those locations like Exeter, Ontario as well.
Another thing about that, Lisa, would be that the website and the help center have a better database as to what services are available where, because I was directed to the Exeter site to have something done, arranged a ride, had issues getting in with my walker, and then an extra long wait. got up to the front and was told that I couldn't do it there.
Oh,
Had to go
Sarah.
home and ended up doing it online.
Okay. Thank you. I'm good. Okay. Yeah,
That
I'm going to follow up with you directly to better understand what you were needing so that I can use that, with your permission, use that exact example with my team.
with
Okay.
my local office, they offer certain services, don't offer certain services. So that's like I said at the start, trying to make sure I was not strictly critical, but also gave credit. They try and put. It seems like they try and put locations everywhere they can. So it's awesome that they try and make it as available as possible. But there are many places that do offer certain services and don't offer others, especially in smaller cities. I call it a satellite city because I would have to go to Ottawa for certain services, or to Hawkesbury, I think, has other services. So it is a thing. It is a thing that I don't know if you specifically know, because each place, is each place, I don't know how to say this, an independent, like a franchise.
So we have two different, and this is where it gets confusing. There are public service Ontario centers that are run by the government of Ontario, and then there's individual independent service Ontario centers that are is like a franchise, if you will. And but I can tell you one thing coming out of the pandemic, and Sarah, you touched on it in terms of data. We are analyzing the particularly in the hot spots. So the city of Toronto, Peel region, York region, Ottawa, and while it's not a hot spot now, it was in the earlier on, and Windsor. We're taking a look at what people were coming or felt they needed to go into a Service Ontario location to access, so we can help start targeting better what we have available online. So your point's not lost with me, and I think as well, one of my takeaways, so thank you, is not only to analyze data in that regard, what people feel they need face-to-face contact for, but what are the differences between what's offered at the various locations. So thank you for that. That's we're working at improving Service Ontario in 2021 as well. So thank you for that. And again, feel free to follow up afterwards. And Sarah and Jay, if you could be the contact person, if anybody has a real life example or frustration that they feel they want to share about their local Service Ontario, if they could share it with either of you, and then you send it forward on their behalf, I'd really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One question, I don't know, because I didn't know the relationship. Like I said at the start, I thought your ministry was the parent that directed. So I want to ask, because for the disabled community, one of the biggest fears, concerns, or thoughts, I don't know how to properly express it because many people have different reasons for the feeling, is that, and this is as a conservative, I guess, would be how I'm framing it instead of directly with the ministry, but we feel like when it comes to responses, or just you're a conservative government, you want to save money, a lot of people feel in the disabled community that it's saved by not giving more support for the disabled community. And that's something that, being in the community, I can honestly say that's how I'll speak for myself, and I have no right to speak for the greater community. I'll speak strictly for myself. Is I have barriers to access ODSP because I would have, this is just my situation, I would have to exit my daughter's life because of the way the program is a program of last resort, and the support that I would get wouldn't allow me to be, it's currently a very below poverty level for many people, depending on situations. But for me, I haven't had that help in over a year because it's unacceptable the conditions I have to accept in order to be honest. So there's many different situations and many people have different parts of their story that they feel, and it's not in fairness to the conservatives, there was the liberals beforehand. It always feels like governments go, well, the disabled community get enough support, they don't need any more, but we've been desperately asking for more. Is there any is how does the community go about explaining how desperately important it is to us that we get more support in a proactive way? Because I this whole situation, this conversation, the podcast, all comes from the situation I was in. I started Twitter bitching and being angry and attacking, and then as the conversation started happening like this and with other politicians, I realized there's a difference between I hate this person to I hate the situation to this. What is the best way for the disabled community to get through, to have our voice, our collective voice heard, where we really do need more, not just more help. There's people like me who fall through the cracks and I'm not on any support at all. So how do we get that message to through? Sorry, that I'm trying not to.
I know.
Constructively.
I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand, and I thank you for being honest, and that just means the world to me today, because I have these ideas percolating in my mind right now just by sharing this hour with you. I want to assure you though, while things may not happen as quickly as people would like, or a different path is taken than what people would like to see, I want to assure everyone listening today that throughout 2020 we've been moving forward with advancing accessibility in Ontario through all of government, and that is not only recognizing how we need to support and better position you to be contributing members of the community and parents and family members, but we also need to recognize that the pandemic has been difficult and created unique challenges as well for all of you. I just want to take this one moment to share with you that we introduced the Ontario Community Support Program, and it's a $16 million investment over 2 years to provide deliveries of food, medicine, and other essentials for those who are self-isolating because of COVID-19. And I certainly can get somebody to follow up with you to share the access point, the link to enable people to apply for that support if you don't already have it. And Sarah, like, I have to tell you, like, when we talked minister to minister, I had you in mind because I think about you sincerely, you know, in you're living on your own, and some of the examples that you shared with me so candidly with regards to accessing your groceries and getting them delivered. That was never lost on me. And, you know, I'm pleased to say that we have introduced this during COVID. But another thing, Jay, through every tough situation, people have to look for opportunities as well. And this is just a light bulb went on for me today in participating in your podcast, because more and more people, it's being realized that more and more people can work remotely from home. And I think we need to pick up the torch here from this podcast and demonstrate that there are willing and able people that may not be able to physically go to an office location, but they can contribute and work from home. And I think we need to put a lens down from that perspective and start identifying people who could do amazing things. to help. Like, for instance, Sarah and Jay, wouldn't you be an amazing constituent assistant for somebody that needs to navigate the social services network? You've lived it. What better person to help other people than somebody who's been there, done that? So I'm kind of buoyed here at the end of the podcast with an idea that I want to take forward to the Premier and my colleagues, the Minister Cho, the Minister responsible for accessibility, and Minister Smith at Children and Community and Social Services. And again, because of my ministry being the machinery of government, if you will, we can enable that opportunity for people to work from home. So I'm off on a tangent here, but there's things percolating right now that I'm excited about.
May I take the opportunity to ask a favor, I guess, or it's something I have to take the opportunity, because I hope that this shows that more politicians from all of the parties would be willing to take part in such conversations as this. But in case this is the one time that I can ask someone to maybe ask or bring up in whatever appropriate setting there is, there really needs to be a clear distinction between I'll say two very distinct groups in the disabled community. There are people who cannot work, and there are a lot of people who cannot work who are judged on programs and supports that exist that are based on promoting. There are people who, if with proper supports and stuff, may be able to find work that is accessible to them. And like you said, remote work, telecommuting is now normalized, and hopefully that continues just period going forward. But there is a very good portion of that community who maybe at the moment they cannot work, but all the supports that are there are geared towards work or promoting work. Can I ask that when you have an opportunity to ask Premier Ford to well, come on the podcast, but also to that there needs to be if you guys are looking at changing things in the future, that's one thing that really needs to change perspective wise for the provinces. There are people who through whatever circumstances cannot be viewed in a way that they can work. There is someone who means a lot to both Sarah and I, who is a bedridden cancer patient, who right now, regardless of what supports there are, she needs to heal. But the programs that exist in a way of, well, you need to work. There's enough.
She has no value.
That's the end result, and the reason I say that distinction needs to be made is there is a massive mental impact on someone who cannot work, who's receiving a message that, well, this program is here to promote work, and if we get you support, you can work and work and work, and all they hear is work. And I understand why you use the word contributing member, but there are people who can, maybe she could paint, maybe she could sell her stuff and pay taxes and so on, but all the supports right now view people as, let's help them get work. So if you're able to take that message on, that there needs to be a distinction, that there are some people who currently cannot work, especially in a pandemic, but who just period may not be able to work no matter what support is given to them.
But they have value.
Thank you for that, and I will take that forward. Thank you for sharing that. That's, yeah, every conversation I have every day, I take something away, and that certainly is a big one for me. I will advocate on your behalf.
Thank you very much. The best thing about the silver lining for me about the pandemic, the positive, is situations like this, where
And you got to meet me.
yes, the second best part of this is you're doing this not only helps people understand politics more, shows the people behind politics, but it also shows that I just asked a conservative, very I want to say questions that may be considered conflict, but I didn't ask it in an angry, aggressive way. I didn't attack you. I just talked to you, and you talked back. And that's one of the main things that I hope people get from this is you took the time to do this. I could have been yelling and angry and mad with my question, but because I talked, you talked back. And that's the most important message through all of this for me personally. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
I just have one more thing I wanted to ask. I wanted to thank you for going with me that time to my appointment at the pain clinic. I think that I was a hero in the chronic pain community for a while there, because nobody else has been able to get anyone to have their MPP go with them, and I think that you saw firsthand that day the impact that nerve blocks have, and we were able to maintain our treatments during COVID, as they had been deemed an essential treatment. So I was quite surprised to hear recently that they're back on the chopping block. I was just wondering, has it come up in conversation that you were there, that you've seen firsthand?
Yeah, we have some more work to do. Again, everything, as you can appreciate, has the Ministry of Health has never been busier trying to navigate, and but we need to keep the conversation going. Okay, that's I have to, and as you can appreciate, with any business, any team, people come and go, and so sometimes we need to take the time to connect with anyone that's new to a position to help them understand why something's important, right?
Well, tell them to come along with me to one of my appointments.
And so I will reach back out and see what we can do in that regard. I'm only one voice, but certainly I will revisit that again for everyone, Sarah.
And hopefully you're willing to come back and we can talk about your new position in the new year as chair. Because that's something that's really important, as well as getting people involved, and you're going to be directly involved in something along those lines. So,
well, I certainly, I can tell you already, during the month of November and December, I've already participated in Commonwealth calls, because my colleague, my friend from Saskatchewan, who's just wrapping up her 3-year term, she's fighting cancer herself right now.
Oh.
And I'm a member of Legislative Assembly in Saskatchewan, and so I took on some of her responsibilities, and I'm up at 4 a.m. so I can with people from Australia and India and Pakistan and the UK. The list goes on and on, but it's so worth it because we learn from each other.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so very much for doing this. I'm very grateful for the time and the conversation and the honesty. It's been very much appreciated.
Do you have any questions for us?
No, I don't. I guess my one, if you funnel any information through to me, Jay, are you okay if I use Sarah as our
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Go back?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, I'll put a call out asking anyone if they know of locations, and we'll try and push that message to, if you have a problem with a service or a service center, to let us know, and maybe we can streamline the information for you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I would just like to say the very best in 2021. Here's to
Thank
health and
you.
happiness.
Thank
And
you
to
very
you too.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye.